The first time I discovered the idea of the so-called intellectual dark web, I found it extremely stupid because I was a fan of Jonathan Haidt, and I liked Steven Pinker. I wasn't as big of a fan. And I had a very low opinion of Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson. And I'm like, how can you put these people in the same grouping? How does this make sense? It seems to be basically just a list of what wannabe conservative intellectuals, what writers they like. And my brother was like, well, if that's the case, that's still a valid use. And I'm like, I guess technically, but it seems so dumb. And I've come to realize Jordan Peterson was actually a lot more insightful than I gave him credit for, because I was learning about him through, I was still mostly following left-leaning media, and especially like breadtubers who were presenting his stupidest takes, often out of context. And I'm realizing I'm coming a lot closer to like the stuff that he used to believe before he went off the rails and started fighting with Elmo on Twitter. I have a friend who I made who is a fan who is like, yeah, you probably wouldn't benefit from most of his books, but you might benefit from reading Maps of Meaning. So I might read that book at some point. But my opinion of Jordan Peterson has improved, especially I'm looking at my channel analytics, and one of my top overlap channels for a while has been this channel PF Jung. So I went and I looked it up, and there's a lot of interesting stuff to say, and few things I would disagree with, especially when it comes to the idea of national service being a good thing. Save that for a different video. But he was a big Peterson fan, and the stuff he shows, I'm like, oh, that is actually pretty insightful. So my opinion of Peterson has gotten better, but nothing I have seen in this time has improved my opinion of Ben Shapiro. And I've realized, so I think the thing is, I was basically doing what Ben Shapiro did in high school, with adults, with New Deal liberalism, which was not in fashion at the time. And so seeing Ben Shapiro doing the same kind of debate bro stuff as an adult, with college students, with the neoconservative, normie conservatism that was popular at the time, first of all, it seems like it's punching down, it seems lazy, it seems like, how can you take someone like this seriously if you're picking fights on people who should be well below you? And the whole Piers Morgan thing where the moment someone challenged him and his normal tactics didn't work, he noped and it's like, oh yeah, I totally got owned. And it's like, yeah, you did, but this is... Also, he's like, his takes, what I've seen, are dumb. Like, I have a low opinion of John Lennon's Imagine, and I will make a video on that at some point. But Ben Shapiro trying to demolish that was really bad. So I've had this low opinion of Shapiro because I think, again, basically, as a teenager, I was doing the same kind of things that he was doing with college students, but I was doing it with adults as a teenager. I was doing it with New Deal liberalism, which was not popular at the time. And I was having like apparent victories, but what I realized is I was not persuading anybody. And so I realized I don't want to be like this because it's not useful. I want to understand why people don't agree with me. And when I started looking into that, I ended up becoming libertarian because I became a lot more skeptical of... I still was not completely anti-social engineering until a few years ago, but I became a lot more skeptical of it at that time and basically became a neoliberal, but I called myself libertarian because I didn't even have conception of what neoliberal was at the time, and then gradually became more libertarian. And so, again, seeing Ben Shapiro, a grown adult, doing the same thing with college students, a grown adult with a media empire, doing the same thing with college students with the dominant ideology, it is, how does anyone take this guy seriously? And I realized, so reading Michael Polanyi, The Logic of Liberty, he has this concept that I want to talk about more called the fiduciary principle, which is basically if you're advancing your opinions, like, there should be costs that you are willing to pay. And I have it's similar to the way Nassim Nicholas Taleb presents skin in the game in his book of the same name, which I've seen people say, I think Taleb thinks most people think his best book is Anti-Fragile, but I've seen people say this is his best book, and I can see increasingly why. I still think Anti-Fragile, it's just because it introduces a lot of things that this book depends on, is better. But it connects with the fiduciary principle that Polanyi described, which he articulated way before Taleb. And I'm realizing I think this is what I just can't, because there are people who have much stupider takes than Ben Shapiro. The reason I absolutely cannot stand the man is because, I mean, for one thing, he built his whole reputation on taking lazy, cheap shots, doing the same kind of things that I did, but from a much easier angle. And I realized I don't want to do that and never seem to really learn. But part of it is also, he didn't have any skin in the game. He doesn't have the fiduciary principle because in the environment he was operating as the conservative media franchise owner, fighting with college students to advance conservative talking points, gets you attention and makes you money. There was no cost to him. And a lot of the people in the intellectual dark web had at least some cost to them. Obviously, Ayan Ali Hirsi has one of the starkest costs because she lost her Dutch citizenship, and that was because of supposed irregularities on application. But that's one of those things where if they want to find that you screwed up legally, they can. They would not have looked into this, and probably a lot of people had similar issues, except for the fact that she was a vocal critic of Islam. So, like, she clearly had a lot of skin in the game. But even people like Jonathan Haidt and Steven Pinker, by going against the consensus in academia where they work, it makes relations with your peers harder. I read a book by Godsod, which I didn't pull, but he talks about, like, people say, oh, you have tenure, you can say anything. And he's like, yeah, I'm tenured at my university, but I have had great jobs, including a job at my dream location that I was turned down for because they didn't like my views. And so Pinker and Haidt were paying costs. Ollie was paying costs. Even Peterson, probably, like, people tried to get him fired from his university, and he's made a different career out of it, but there were costs to him for what he said. Ben Shapiro is the only one in this whole collection, this intellectual dark web, who was not following the fiduciary principle. He had nothing to lose and everything to gain. And again, also, as I said, nothing I've seen adds anything. Like, he is a very normie neoconservative, and I have never heard anything from him that seems insightful. And even, like, again, Imagine should have been a easy target, and I still thought he did that terribly. So I just can't stand Ben Shapiro, and I've been thinking about this. I wanted to make this video, and then when I read Logic of Liberty and this idea of the fiduciary principle, I realized, oh, this is another factor for why again, there's so many people who have stupider views, or more views that I find more offensive. The thing that I find offensive about Ben Shapiro is how completely unserious he is for how seriously people take him. So anyways, thanks for watching. I'm Magpie, this is Leela, and I'll see y'all in the next one.